IMHO Talk Show. We here, y'all. We here. How's everybody feeling today?
Doing all right. Doing good. You know, I was just thinking I never get tired of hearing that theme song.
That's right. That's right. IMHO Talk Show online. Tell a friend, tell a friend. We are back. We have yet another COVID-19 response for the city of Charlottesville. We are here with our good friends from Cville tomorrow. You got Sir Charles.
Miss Max.
You got Razor.
Hey, Ron, what's up, y'all?
Hey, Ron, a little slow. He had to put the shea butter bottle down.
Yeah.
So,
I got some shea butter and some black soap. I'm doing a mixture
He
today.
got that glorified Easter shea butter trying to resurrect that skin this morning.
yeah, so as we said, thank you all for staying tuned and joining. We got to be here for the people, right? The People Station 101 Jams is where we started.
That's
the
right.
Flagship for IMHO Talk Show.
Yes, indeed.
Man, and thank you all for hitting the YouTube channel and all that good stuff. And tuning in. Before we had a great kickoff for our COVID-19 special virtual town hall. Thank everyone. We're back at it to do it again. So y'all make sure IMHO Talk Show online. 434-422-9101 for this virtual town hall special. You don't want to miss it. Cville tomorrow. We got Police Chief Miss Rochelle Brackney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Andrew Baxter.
Yes, sir.
And the clinician, therapist, the all-around black man's black man.
Yes.
Gene Cash.
Sir Gene Cash. Charles, I don't mean take that from you. But when he come in, you got to call him sir. Nothing else will work.
Absolutely, man. So, give it up. So, without further ado, how about we just go ahead and get into some things? We have Giles representing Cville tomorrow on with us right now. How you doing, brother Giles?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Beautiful spring day out there.
Hey, that hand clap.
Giles, I think you have graduated. He called you Brother Giles.
Yeah, Brother Giles.
I was wondering if there was some kind of like initiation ceremony at some point. When you say IMHO family, am I involved in that? Is that like the kids squeezing in on the hug?
You are Ashy brother.
Background. I appreciate that, Max.
Hey, Joe, you are Ashy brother. I don't know if you heard that or not. You the fair-skinned brother out the group. You still got to stand in the back.
Hey, I got Robinson in my family name. I'm like way back. So.
Oh yeah.
That wasn't no slave now, was it? That sounds like talking about how far back we going, Mr. Giles? Do this dial tone work, Mr. Giles?
Yeah, can we talk about the news, people?
Yes, sir. Smart move, Mr. Giles. Get back in the back where I put you at, Mr. Giles.
Yeah, I'm from really far north, I swear.
Well, family, if you're new to IMHO, get used to it because that's just how we do.
Yes, indeed.
Right? We want to give you the news. We want to keep things in perspective, give you our humble opinions. But ain't nothing wrong with having a little fun, especially at a time like this. You got to lighten up a little bit.
Yes, you do.
Have to.
That's right. The ends is gonna be what it's gonna be, right? So just keep the faith, stay strong, smile through it, and let's have each other's back. That's what we're doing. That's why you see such a diverse group that we have on this lineup, because that's just what we got to do. We got to stick together as a human race for one.
That's right.
There you go.
So that being said, Cville tomorrow, man, and what's going on right now, Giles? Tell us a little bit about that newsroom. I know you guys have been trying to report on some of the African American disparities, correct? You want to give us a little backdrop on what your journalists have been working on there?
Well, that's just a really interesting subject that's starting to be, reported heavily in the national news, but getting localized data is much harder. So I think that's a kind of a topic for discussion that we should bring up, and that hopefully people listening to the show can help our reporters clue into. But basically,
Hey, Giles, before you go too far,
there was
real
a big
quick.
CDC study. Go ahead.
Before you go too quick, that's what's something that always threw me. We'll say national stores, but not local. But what if I'm from California? You know what I'm saying? My local store is a national store for somebody else. So I always wonder why the communities don't engage in where they live in and want to talk about things abroad so fast.
Yeah, well, see, there goes Troy derailing the conversation.
My bad. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, it's a real point you have, and for me, I feel like they should be the same thing. But there are things about how you get facts and information right that come from either the national landscape, which means essentially federal government and national institutions and all of their data. And then you have stories that you are trying to pursue locally that the data is coming from local sources, right? So, and a lot of times the national sources are far out ahead of the local sources in terms of what they can pull off, but also they're not as, it's not as specific, right? So, for instance, the Washington Post was the story that they pulled on the CDC study, which is basically saying there's a disproportionate impact on African American communities in the cities they've been studying, which are a number of major cities all across the country. But then they came back and looked at, and DC included in that, but they came back and looked at state by state statistics. And for instance, Maryland, the state delegates sent a letter to the governor saying we need more localized data and we need specifics around race and demographics. And in Virginia, they weren't tracking deaths by race. They were tracking, they have been tracking cases. So you can't necessarily see, oh, wow, African Americans, like the death rate is higher here. We don't even have that number in Virginia yet. But if you look at other cities where it's hitting, that seems to be the case. So the question is why? The U.S. Surgeon General just came out and sort of made a statement about it, because him being African American was like, this is me and you and everyone who's listening to me, pay attention to this. So I think what we need to do as local reporters is try to find a way to put pressure on the systems to give us the localized data, but also for the community to start telling their anecdotal stories about what's happening.
Absolutely. Now, Giles, let me interject there, where I think that we should take that conversation, and that was a great introduction on how to report, because like there's a lot of gray area when it comes to reporting that, right? Because you still have some people who talk about, well, why do we have to always make stuff about race, right? So let's look at the history of this thing. So you have, as we've reported on before, you have things like clinical case trials and all this kind of stuff, and all the testing that, whether people want to admit it or not, has generationally been passed down. It's mental stigmas on why a lot of African Americans fear the healthcare system or don't trust the healthcare system, right? So then you have a whole group of people who don't want to necessarily go to the doctor. Like they may do home remedies and things like that. Then there's another part to where there's some, a lot of us who have jobs in the service industry. And I personally have an issue, in my humble opinion, of a lot of these service industries being called essential employees. You know what I'm saying? Because there's some places who are just open for the money and they don't care about people's lives. But unfortunately, a lot of African Americans who live in low income areas, they have those jobs where they have to go to work. And of course, there are essential employees like Order Up. We're feeding you. You got the hospital workers and the law enforcement that also are essential workers, right? So there's a wide gamut, but I think we got to be careful. And Giles, I'm curious how you can be fair and balanced when you report on those things, because a lot of times people want to be like, oh, well, African Americans think they got that, some people call it Wakanda blood. They don't think they can be affected by this COVID-19, and they still having parties and all this kind of stuff. So that's very unfair for people to paint that picture without also talking about the disproportionate healthcare system that's at hand as well, and our social economics that's forcing us into public places. So I'm just curious, Giles, when you look at those three things, like how you guys can approach that when you report it.
So I think that this is kind of like the stage where we've been in, from a reporting standpoint up until now, has really been like ferrying the main sources of information to the community at a time when things are happening super fast. And now that things kind of has slowed down from that perspective, but the impact is about to happen, like the public health impact is about to happen really locally and hit, where people will be hospitalized and, hopefully people won't die, but they may, and the math says that they will. And then at the same time, the economic realities are spiraling out now and really starting to hurt people at home. So now is where we have to start taking a look at some of these harder issues that you're talking about. Now, there are lists out there about which businesses are open right now. We know, people know what's open and what's not, and who got listed per the governor's announcement, what's essential and what's not. So I think we do, that's what we should be looking at, right? Is to see, but we also need, I think, people from inside those industries, anonymous, however they want, to be reaching out, because there's this challenge right now with trust and talking to the media and this tension around whether the cure is worse than the illness, right? Is the economic impact of this worse than the health impact? And while we still have that dichotomy, people are really confused about where they land, what they're willing to say, what their employer wants them to say, what the ramifications might that be. And I think people need to be really real with the fact that this is going to go out many months now, the economic impact, and we've not really felt locally the health impact yet, right? Like your hospital is not filling up yet, Charles, but it will. That's what the math says.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron, I think you had something.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the sentiments and everything that we're discussing. One of the issues, and I wanted to ask Giles this, is that from a media standpoint, I don't even know if he could even answer it, but the problem I have with how information is being reported, and I think we would all agree, is that the more that this problem becomes a black problem, the less it becomes a problem. And I think that's something that people really need to be aware of that. Because when this becomes a black problem, it now becomes, and this history, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, this history of this country has shown numerous examples, okay, how do we isolate this black problem from the rest of the problems that we have?
Ouch.
And that is extremely important for people to think about. In the 60s, when we had the riots and everything you think about, from drugs being imported into our communities, everything you think about, when this becomes a black problem, which it is becoming because we are being the face of this problem, whether we like it or not, now it becomes, okay, let's hurry up and get back to work.
Yeah.
Let's hurry up and start our lives.
Right.
Because this no longer applies to us, and I see no evidence of how this is not going to occur. And the national media, subconsciously or consciously, this is not me even putting on a conspiracy hat. This is what normally happens. Even in Katrina, everybody's like, okay, woe is me. Let's send some money down. But how quickly can we get these niggers to go in these FEMA trailers and get this problem solved? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's what it becomes.
Max?
If I could just chime in here, because I definitely think that this pandemic that we're facing right now is hitting the disproportionate or the disenfranchised in a great way. But I don't know that I wholeheartedly agree with the fact of it becoming presented as a black face or a black issue or affecting blacks the most. And now let's get back to work, because when you start to break down how it affects everyone, all the businesses having to close, the businesses losing money, the teachers that are at home, the kids that can't go to school, I really think that it is affecting everyone equally in some ways of speaking. And I think that we can't lose sight of that. Oftentimes and sometimes rightfully so, we take an issue and we divvied it up as to who it affects and how it affects and why it's worse here versus there. But sometimes I think you just have to look at things for what they are. We are all suffering here. My suffering may not look like your suffering, but it's still a problem. And I think sometimes we don't get to the solutions of problems because we get tied up in who it affects worse, how it affects them, how it's portrayed versus trying to fix it overall. Well put. If that makes sense.
Well, hey, can I say something to that real quick? So, Max, I 100% agree with you. And actually, you proved my point. My point is that let's not run away. So let's just say that everything it is, number one, let's make sure we're being clear. It is affecting everyone. Let's be clear about that. However, we start to see the statistics that say that this thing is disproportionately affecting African Americans, black people, whatever people want to call it, going to, as a nation, as this human people that we say that we are the people that need the most help going to get it? That is my question. And that's why I brought that up, is because we can all be one big family now, but in D.C., in Southeast, you know what? They've got the higher rates of cases. That's what I'm saying, is that if this is really affecting these communities hard, then we should, as one community family, be trying to figure out, okay, they can affect everybody. How do we rally around it? And that's my concern, is that even when we say that it's not a race thing, it always ends up being a race thing. I don't know. The boogeyman just jumped out the closet. You know? I'm not trying to go down that road. What I'm saying is that I think that we all need to be conscious about these people in our society, and everybody, but the ones that are most vulnerable, they need the most help.
Let me say something before we take a break. Let me say something. Both of y'all are absolutely right. Now, where the media, and Giles, I really want you to look at this, and this is why I applaud what Cville Tomorrow is doing, is that you're telling the truth. Because the media has already started saying that 70% of the African Americans have the virus. Instead of everybody looking into what the original thing was said, that 70% of the African Americans that obtained the virus in urban areas were the ones that were losing their lives. And me personally, I think that's because of the transportation system. A lot of African Americans in inner cities don't have cars. So then you have people confined in a small box. One person start coughing, the average cough can go 100 feet. Yeah. It quickly affects everybody in those areas. That's right. Now, if you start looking at African Americans that are not in metropolitan areas where they're not using the bus systems, that number is not at 70%. Yep. So the media has a large part to play about making sure certain people end up wearing this on their back like the scarlet letter. We have to attack that. Chop the head off of it as soon as we see it, because I've already seen Facebook posts where people that don't look like me are starting to use that, like, well, it's like the fear monger. It's like, oh, well, all Chinese people are bad now. You know what I'm saying? Don't eat Chinese food because they the ones that started eating bats. They this, that, and the other. Now it's 70% of the African Americans got it. All right, so the media is really where we need to attack this at. Let's take a break real quick.
Yeah, and then we can follow up on that. Y'all hold your thoughts. And listeners, you are listening to IMHO Cville Tomorrow, yet another virtual special, our virtual town hall. We got a great lineup today once again, so y'all hit us up online, IMHO Talk Show, or here at the station with your questions and comments. We're live. 434-422-9101. Great, needed discussion. Hope y'all enjoying it. Stay tuned.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. We still here. We still standing. Sir Charles.
Razor in here somewhere.
Hey, Ron, what's up?
Hey. So thank you all once again for joining us. Yet another IMHO episode, another special, our virtual town hall on our city's COVID-19 response. You know, and our conversation is very well needed. It's very well informed. Like I said, great lineup. Don't want to miss it. We're gonna keep this going. We're gonna stay here for the people, man. Like we say, Giles, this fits right in to one of our mottos, which is, you know, taking Cville to the world and bringing the world to Cville. So that's right, because this is it's bigger than us.
Picking up on where Max and Aaron were talking, I really think it gets at, you know, the challenge for us as reporters, but also just as a community in the next couple months, which is that it's true that a moment like this can really become an unconscious bias train, a gear that turns over and feeds systems that have not been working for a long time, because it can turn into Hungry Hippo, right? And when things turn into Hungry Hippo, who wins? Like the big hippos. But the flip side of that, right, is that all of the games have moved towards government again, because that's where the money is and where the decision-making capacity is, right? So when the private system dials down, government is so important. Well, who does government work for? All of us. Right. So how can we use this as an opportunity to go the other way? If we're all in the same boat, and this is all affecting all of us, but the impact is harder on people who have less, how can we, in this moment, to Max's point, be unified? And you look at the stories we've written in the past week about feeding the front lines, or people finding innovative ways to get masks to the hospital workers, or, you know, what's going on in the schools in terms of trying to get, you know, equitable access to the curriculum into every household. There's a lot of good things happening, but will the city and the county budget discussions, will the school board decisions that Juan and his colleagues have to make, I mean, those are so high stakes now, and the pie has gotten so much smaller than we thought it was going to be 2 months ago. So now is a time where a community can really step up, and especially a community like ours that have already been through something together, right? Where we've gotten to ground truth. Can we take this moment and look at what is essential? Who does work together? What is working for households? Who we know we need to take care of? And then come out of this stronger than we were when That's right. And I think that's the opportunity, and that's the hopeful way to look at what's happening right now.
That's right, man. Man, thank you for that. Couldn't have said that better, man. Because and to feed off of what all of you just said as well, is that it's not just the race thing that we have to be mindful of that potentially could happen. We need to keep control of. It's social economic as well. So regardless of your race, because one thing that I am watchful of is that once there is a cure or vaccination, medication, whatever you want to call it, we've seen it time after time. So it's not being so to not be naive, you got to remember that if somebody can afford it, they're gonna just afford it.
Right.
And if you can't, you just can't.
Right.
So for us to be like, oh yeah, it's kumbaya now, we're all Americans. That's because we all are affected the same right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's be real. But
I certainly think it's time for us to look at things differently. It's like if you think about what's happened in the recent years in the United States, things are happening that are really shaking up our infrastructure and are really unveiling the cracks in that infrastructure and the fact that they need fixing. And so this virus really is doing the exact same thing. And so we need to set aside our political differences. And if we come out of this, thinking along the exact same lines that we did before we went into it, and not really changing things and beginning to look at things differently and figuring out how to just make this United States a greater place. It may sound corny, but a greater place. Then we're asking for it. Like really, we should come out of this a better people and a better country and a better government all across the board. That's
right. Yeah, and one big thing that has been in our area that made it back into the news this week, but a lot of people aren't paying attention to any other news, or it flies under the radar, is that Governor Northam has actually signed a new legislation, in agreement with funding to remove Confederate statues. Yeah. So, as big as news on any other week, that would have been front page headline news, right? So that's one thing that, that I commend our journalists with integrity, like Cville tomorrow, is that not forgetting stories that still affect our day-to-day lives. Like Giles said, we got to line up a guest coming after we get through this, to where we still need to have these conversations where we left off regarding the schools and other things affecting our people, locally. So, but we do have Elliot on with us as well, chief editor for Cville tomorrow. How you doing, Elliot?
Oh, pretty good.
Good. So Elliot, I mean, as far as
hey, Charles, is that Elliot with the beard or Elliot without the beard?
Elliot without the
That's Elliot
beard.
Without the beard.
For those who know Mr. Elliot Robinson, he is playing it safe, and he's becoming extra sanitary because he's removed the facial hair. Look, clean cut. Elliot, I'm gonna have to get used to this. I gotta tell you the truth, Elliot. I gotta get used to it.
I'm not used to it either. I was going here for 2 years straight.
Yeah. Elliot made me cut my beard off.
Hey,
looking when he posted it early that morning, I looked at him. I said, "If he can do it, I know I can do it."
Did you say each one teach one?
Each one teach one.
Hey, but Elliot, we were just talking about, so while all this is going on, like, what's a couple of your top stories that you got your guys covering right now?
Right now, that's the biggest thing with us is just like, because we know from what all the officials are saying that this is almost like a little bit of the calm before the storm. So we were just looking at if there's enough masks going to medical workers now. Are the medical workers and the first responders getting treated right? Are they getting fed? Are they getting things that they need? And also taking a look at the other after effects. I mean, the high schoolers have lost like the end of their school year that they were looking forward to. People are in quarantine and their cars are just sitting there. It's just a question of like, well, we got to at least do some basic maintenance there. And it's just looking at all the organizations that are helping out and helping people. And a lot of them are nonprofits and they're going to need help soon. Some of them, this was their campaign season. And people are out of jobs, don't have funding. It's like, well, who's going to help fund them?
Elliot got a point. Because I know about 40 friends of mine that everybody inspection sticker dead on the car. You know what I'm saying? Like, be honest.
You ain't dry snitching over there, are you?
No, I ain't snitching. I'm just telling you.
No, he's definitely dry snitching. He's trying to get some business over
I'm just trying to say, you know, when there's an epidemic, you can let some things go for a little bit, but you still got to be cognizant.
We also looked at earlier in the week, you know, just the payroll protection program and all the small businesses trying to get in that line. I think that's a really interesting one that fits into maybe what Aaron was saying, you know, just like how fair is that process going to play out? Who's going to get access to it? And that's high stakes right now, right? For any business that's closed, if they can, you know, get that basically forgivable loan to keep their people on their payroll, they can make it to the other side of this. If they can't, they can't. And there's a lot of businesses to what you know, what Charles, you were saying. I mean, what types of businesses already have a local lender who they work with throughout the year, who can also turn on a dime and get this complicated application in place and get to the front of the line and get the money while the SBA is still getting it out there. You know,
yes, that's right.
That's another fairness and transparency issue that's going to take months to unpack. And so I will say, as we report, please, if you're listening and you're affected, please hit us up, whether it's anonymous or in person. Please let our reporters know what your experience is like.
Yeah, and that is a great segue, you know, in just a minute over to our next guest, Mr. Juan Wade from the Career Center here in our city and county. But Giles, you know, in saying that, make sure that people know how to reach out to you guys and you know, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, our contact stuff is all on the website, cvilletomorrow.org, or you can get Elliot on Twitter. What is it? Exit 265C was it? It's the Hampton exit. You catch him there. My email is just gmorris@cvilletomorrow.org. And our reporters, every story that they write, their contact information is on it, so you can hit them up.
Nice. And I know Aaron has a question too. So I think Max and Aaron want to chime in. But Giles, Ella, you guys gonna stay on with us for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. Sure. All right, Aaron, what you got?
Actually, my question is for everybody. There was a great article written on the Medium about what we're going to see within the next 5 or 6 months, and I think Giles will probably be able to attest to this a little bit better. The massive marketing and advertising campaign from retailers. Once things start to get lifted, I think we all need to be prepared that they're going to be trying to push us outside to go buy stuff. I was wondering how we all feel about just that sentiment, even government as well, because obviously everybody wants the economy to flow and people to start working and things of that nature. But I mean, Charles and I talked about this, that you know, you can look in the LA sky right now and there's not a cent of pollution. You know, somebody said that they saw coyotes on the Golden Gate Bridge or something like that, like the animals out here partying and having a good time. So I guess what's the balance of dealing with going back to the normal way of life, whatever that looks like, and then also, like Max was saying, taking this opportunity to, I guess, enjoy some of the piece of this. It's kind of a huge dichotomy, and I want to know how you guys all felt about that.
Yeah, that's big, man. You know, what that reminds me of, what I feel about it, man, is based on a conversation that I heard by some comedians. They were talking about how your small venues, your small clubs, and that goes for small businesses across the board, right? It's going to be a huge struggle for them to maintain their business through this and to reopen, because a lot of us aren't that financially stable to be able to sustain this drought, right? So then some of the bigger ones will be okay, and then think about like some of the like contracted entertainment or any contracted work, right? The bigger names that can draw more, business for these folks, they will get the first dibs. So like your smaller entertainers, they're still going to be struggling, and so like there's a whole healing process we got to go through. Think about the liability, like take inspirational cuts. Like there's some sort of liability if you open your doors too fast. If they tell you that people are okay, but it's still going to be lingering, so we got a long way to go. But at the same time, I am hopeful for things getting back to at least semi-normal. But it's going to be a different world. You know how we used to say post 9/11? There's going to be a post COVID-19 world.
It's me personally, if I can go real quick. My mindset is a little bit different. I believe that things have run so amok that a lot of businesses, a lot of entertainers, a lot of things that were going on will fall by the wayside, and for good reason. I'm happy for that. Like you have to have seasons that exit out stuff. When winter comes along, things that are not strong die off, and they're supposed to. Like people are making music and saying derogatory things and doing crazy stuff. That is not music. You know what I'm saying? It's for somebody to make money. Is their way of expressing themselves? Yes, but there's things out here that need to die off. Period. Point blank. Because it's hurting the human race as a whole. It's just the way I see it. So some of these big businesses that we think will sustain will not sustain. Why? Because the amount of money that they owe every month is great. You know, you're going to find a lot of people who were on top of the game go to the bottom. You're going to see people who were on the bottom are going to rise to the top. Now, I believe a lot of that is God's work. Me personally. So certain people need to be in certain positions. Not to tote my own horn or the guys from 106 that were with Order Up, but God allowed us to do something that everybody else could not do. You're not supposed to have people come through and feed people and people congregate and they complaining on other entities that did the exact same thing that we did. And the people that were supposed to, I guess, stop us, so to speak, were the people that were supporting us the most. That's God's work. That's favor of God. You know, so certain things are supposed to die off. Certain things are supposed to rise to the top.
Yeah, I agree with what Razor said in a lot of ways. I was listening to an interview here recently when someone had asked Doctor, what type of things should we expect as a result of COVID-19? And in the doctor's response, one of her answers was, people are going to die. Expect that.
Right.
And so to Razor's point just now, some businesses are going to go under. Expect that. Not everyone will survive. And it's kind of like that cycle of life now, or circle of life. And I'm not wishing that on anybody.
Right.
But it's reality, and it is what it is. And in terms of going out there and spending my own money, as Aaron was talking about, the marketing and, you know, building the economy back up and things like that. Like I said, this virus has put a lot of things into perspective for me. So I'm not going to go out and spend my dollar for the sake of somebody else surviving or thriving when I need to do the same myself, you know?
That's right.
So I just think that, you know, we really need to all come out of this a lot smarter. That's all.
Thank you for that.